In this video, I'll cover how I typically set up my electric guitar with Logic Pro X and an audio interface when jamming and recording. I'll cover the details of configuring my guitar, Logic Pro X, and an audio interface. The end of the video overviews how to output sound and includes a few extras. I'll start out with the basics about configuring your guitar. There are a few guitar settings I need to make for my Fender Stratocaster, which are pretty common for most other guitars as well. The first is the volume here, obviously to turn your volume up or down, and these other two buttons are for tone, to affect your tone in different ways that you would like. And another thing to consider is this switch here, which will switch back between the different pickups here. In my case, they're humbuckers or Fender noiseless pickups. And then finally, you're going to want to put your guitar cord plugged in here as the output in your guitar to be input into another place. This is how I usually set up my guitar with an amplifier. I input my guitar into the foot pedal, and then I input my foot pedal into my amplifier, which we are about to see in more detail. I mostly use one foot pedal with my amplifier, as it is my preference to keep it more simple. Other guitarists may use several, like this, or none at all. Here's a closer look at the foot pedal, with the guitar coming in and with the output that is connected to the amplifier's input. And finally, here's the amplifier with an input coming in from the foot pedal and the output going into input 1 on the audio interface, which we will be configuring later in the video. This is the audio interface I'll be using for this video, the Focusrite Scarlett 2i4. The Scarlett 2i4 has two inputs and two outputs: gain control, volume control, a USB port, a headphone jack, and more. There are several different kinds of audio interfaces that are made by different vendors and are different sizes. This is another example of a larger Focusrite Scarlett audio interface. This is the 18i20. It has 10 inputs and 10 outputs, and some additional settings that the 2i4 does not have. Next, we'll take a look at the key Logic Pro X features you need to know. Because Logic Pro X needs to run on a device, in my case a laptop, you'll need to connect your audio interface to your device. Mine is connected like this via a USB cable that goes from the back of the audio interface into a USB port on the device. In order to use your guitar with the Logic Pro X, you'll first need to create an instrument track. This is how you create an instrument track. I usually start out with an audio track, which is basically a bass track with no effects. If you would like to, you can also add a Logic Pro X guitar sound to your track. The track will already be picking up the effects you are sending it from your amp, so you want to be careful here. You want to make sure to configure your inputs and outputs in the audio preferences. We'll be configuring the input as the Scarlett 2i4 audio interface. The output can change depending upon how you want to hear your guitar. Let's take a look at some key settings on the inspector panel. If the inspector panel is not visible, click on the inspector panel icon to open it. As we saw earlier in the video, the amplifier is connected to input 1 on the audio interface. This is how you configure inputs in Logic Pro X. I will set input 1 to match the amplifier's input. You'll also want to make sure to configure your output settings. I mostly select stereo output. Logic Pro X plugins are a great way to add more spice to your guitar sound. I'll demo a few that are my normal go-tos. You can add as many as you would like to your instrument track. Plugins are located on the inspector panel. If the inspector panel is not visible, click on the inspector panel icon to make it visible. Existing plugins can be turned on or off by clicking on this power icon, and they can be changed by clicking on the arrows button. You can add new plugins by clicking on the gray area down here. My go-to plugins include the Guitar Tuner, which I turn on to tune my guitar and then turn back off while playing. The Pedal Board, which allows you to add more pedal effects to your sound. The Amp Designer, which allows you to dial in your existing amp sound or select another amp. You can also change the microphone position or brand. Channel EQ allows you to fine-tune your EQ levels. And the very handy compressors. Most of the plugins have templates for guitar sounds. Next, we'll explore some options for outputting your guitar sound. The most common way I output my guitar sound is in a practice setting. In this case, I would configure my audio interface like this, utilizing the two outputs in the back, which will connect to two monitor speakers. The other end of the 1/4-inch cable plugs into the back of the monitor speakers like this. You can also listen to your guitar with headphones. There are inputs for headphones in both the audio interface and my device that I can choose from. These settings can be configured in the Logic Pro X audio preferences, which we saw earlier in the video. You could also output sound from your device. And finally, if you would like to, you could mute the sound on your instrument track, and then you could only hear it coming out of your amplifier. Lastly, I'll demo some extras to consider. Some extras you may consider using with your electric guitar, Logic Pro X, and an audio interface include headphones, one or many foot pedals, and converter cables depending upon your hardware needs. Thanks so much for watching this video. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments section below.